Welcome to Coffee and Divination, a podcast about the arts of obtaining hidden knowledge in changing times. Join me, Joanna Farrar, to chat with experts from around the world on tarot, runes, geomancy, and the many ways divination can help us navigate and plan our paths ahead. So welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so very happy to welcome back to the podcast, Ivy Bromius. Ivy is a professional project manager. She is a witch, a fantastic tarot reader, and a professional consultant. She has over 30 years of experience helping companies plan and initiate their projects, and over 10 years running her magical website, Circle Thrice. She has authored a number of online works, including the Cancer Grimoire, and she also releases monthly and quarterly magical planning guides through the membership feature of her website, Circle Thrice. She is a fantastic witch and a wonderful person to talk to, and I am so happy to have her back on the podcast. So thank you for being here again, Ivy.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So this is a wonderful time of year for a conversation like this. We are approaching, at the time we're recording this, we're approaching, winter solstice time, and we are also approaching the new year. And I know you have had an enormous amount happening on your website. So I wanted to first kind of throw it over to you. I just gave that tiny little introduction of who you are and what you do, but how would you describe what you offer as a magician and witch and what your projects are that you do on Circle Thrice?
So I can't believe you're correct. It's been almost 10 years, and I'm sort of surprised to realize it's been that long that I've been running it. I've been a project manager for a really long time, and that means that I help people, like companies and teams, get things done. That's my mojo. I get shit done, right? And I can help groups do that. And I'm professionally certified, and I have a lot of professional experience on it. I'm also, though, since my teen years, a practicing witch and magician. And at some point, about 15 or so years ago, I started to realize that the tools of project management, which are pretty occult or hidden if you're not a project manager, and the tools of the witch and mage, which are pretty occult and hidden if you're, not a magical person, go together really nicely. They fit together in a way that makes both your magic better, but also allows you to make big changes in your life. Because whatever you're doing magic for, there's probably actually a project hidden in there that you need to do. And, when we all started out kind of as our little baby witches, the one thing that you keep reading over and over is that you have to do the mundane work as well as the magic, right? You want to do magic to find a job, you also actually have to apply for a job. They kind of go together. And that's great and seems pretty self-explanatory, but what if it's a big project or complicated, or there's a lot of risk in your life, you're worried about things. And that's where I discovered that my PM skills, my project management skills, and my PM skills, my practical magic skills, work together. So on the site, I have a lot of information and material around goal setting and running big projects and integrating magic into your life in a way that gets more done and more accomplished, both magically and mondanely. And it culminated about I think it's been about 18 months, 2 years now, in a membership where I do a monthly planner of all the magical days for each month based on astrological and grimoire alignments, saints' days, the decans. I have a bunch of stuff I plug in there. The idea is that you do magic, you want to do good timing on your magic, right? So you want to do things at the right times. And this planner can help. So my members get the planner. And as you noticed, I'm just now launching a kind of a quarterly calendar as well, which shows which planets are in retrograde, when the eclipses are, all that kind of useful information.
Absolutely. And I think that we're going to talk, obviously this is a podcast which is about magic, but also kind of specifically talks more about divination and how divination plays in with magic. So I particularly want to dive down a little bit into how you view the arts of divination playing into project management. But before we even get there, I wanted to ask, so when you were you have all of these beautiful resources that you give people for timing and for ideas of what they can do on a monthly and quarterly basis. But before we even get to that, there is the initial question of helping people, which I know you do as a consultant. And just to let everyone know, not to hide anything, I've worked with Ivy. I think Ivy as a professional is amazing, and I vouch for her 100% as a person and as a witch. But when you work with people, one of the first things that is necessary for witches and people is to figure out what their project really is, to figure out what their goals or their desires are. And I was wondering if you could we can dive into that. I have a few specifics, but how you view goal setting or that giant topic.
Well, I think that all humans are kind of bad at figuring out what it is they want, right? I think a lot of us started out as like 8 and 9-year-olds wanting to be, cowboys or, I don't know, astronauts or princesses, or it was a long list. But we don't really know until we get there what's truly going to fulfill us and make us happy. So for me, it's not about an end state. It's always about a process. And this process involves figuring out what it is you value in your life and in the world. What do you want to manifest more of? And kind of who you want to be from a value standpoint. And then from values, it naturally flows to kind of your vision for your life. Where would you like to see yourself going? And only through that process do we end up with really concrete projects, because the risk, especially with someone, I tend to be hyper practical. Like my magic is very witchy and kind of intuitive, but my nature, I'm a very pragmatic sort of person. The risk here is that you advise someone on how to accomplish their goals, and then 4 years later, they're a lawyer and they suddenly realize that was a mistake. They don't actually want to be a lawyer. There's goal achievement is one thing, but without kind of the more spiritual context, you risk reaching the wrong goal. Or, you're on this path that's taking you in a wrong direction for your life. There could be goals that are perfectly correct for one person that are wrong for another, just because they have different values and different ways of being in the world. And that's always got to be the first step before you get down into kind of the nitty gritty of like, how do I make a goal that's smart and doable? And how do I break that into tasks that I can accomplish before any of that? And to me, this is kind of like a waterfall. There's sort of a wellspring within you, which is kind of your purpose for being in the world. And that sounds really big, but your purpose can be simple and small. Everyone has whatever purpose they have. And from there flows down to all of the things you might like to accomplish and your path through your life.
So by using the values of what it is that is truly important to you, that's how you kind of first come to an understanding of which, I don't remember which book it was, but like which wall you should put your ladder against so that you're not climbing the wrong wall, shall we say, with all of your steps. But first you have to know what it is that is truly important to you from a magical, but also an ethical standpoint, what you value. With that being said, though, there's sometimes I've seen this discussion amongst witches and other magic folk about whether it is something, whether you should go first magically when you're setting goal setting, whether you're going for what you need or what you desire or what you want. And some people make sort of distinctions between needs and desires. And I was wondering if you had any opinion about that kind of distinction, because anyway.
You're like, I have an opinion, but I'm going to let you tell me. I actually think that's a bit of a false dichotomy. Now, certainly there's things that we want that aren't particularly meaningful. I seriously want a piece of chocolate right now. And okay, after we're done, I'll go grab one. It'll be fine. But that's not a super meaningful want. That's just something I want, right? Something I'd like to have. New socks, piece of chocolate, right? Cup of coffee in the morning. But if we're attempting to integrate our magic in our lives, to be the person we are kind of all the time and do the magic and build the life we want to live, then there's not a huge difference in my mind between needs and wants. And I think that if we're not careful, we could be really limiting. We could limit ourselves by saying, well, you don't really need that. And I think that that's incredibly hard, because we have to be really careful, because we live in a very capitalistic society. And whether you like the core idea or not, things are pretty flawed out there in terms of the way we run our economic system. And that means that we are ironically both richer and poorer than anybody, right? In that we have access to incredible things, the internet, right? Electricity, awesome stuff. And at the same time, we are stripping the land of its resources and harming animals. And so nobody's hands are clean in the West. We're all red-handed. We're all part of the system. So distinguishing between what we need and want is very hard, because we have to do it within that context. We have to do it within the context of resource depletion and colonialism and inherent structures of inequality that we just showed up for. We didn't build them, but here they are. Better than to focus on what it is you care about, what you value, and strive toward that. And then with luck, the rest of it will align, right? Because we could all like go be freegans in the streets and just live like off of free things. And we could do that. We're still not going to solve the system, because the system is just running along. The way to, I think, solve the ethical quandary, which is where I think that whole needs versus wants thing comes from. It comes from a sense of discomfited ethics. Like, how can I be in this world and not be harming, right? Well, you can't, and that sucks. But this is the world we're in, the material plane, where we're here to learn lessons. So you focus on what you value and you try to align your life around it. And I got to be honest, these values aren't like Miss Universe values. I would like world peace and happiness for all. Yeah, sure. But like, you might really find that you value things that don't sound like that. I happen to value, this is kind of funny, but I value competence. Being competent is probably my core North Star guiding value, which just sounds dumb. It doesn't even sound like a real thing, but that's what I care about. It's what I try to manifest. It's what I'm attracted to in others. I like people who know how to do things and do those things well, right? It's just what I value. It's not right or wrong. You might value beauty, which sounds shallow, but it's not. The world could use as much beauty as it can get right about now, right? You might value adventure, or you might value stability, and both of those are fine. Yeah. So better to figure out what's inside you, what you really value from inside you, not what society says or capitalism says or other people say about wants and needs. In your heart, you work on getting that out, building a life around that, and then your life will have meaning. That's my theory.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And that comes from that really just at the very outset of this whole discussion. It is saying that, and I'm sure that I'm not a project planner, but I can imagine this must be the same. I practice permaculture, so, and you do too. So the idea that one of the first principles is observation. So really what you were talking about is observation of the self and figuring out what it is that you value about yourself and your relationship to the world. That's the first step of observation, really. And then from there, you can move to the next step of observation or planning or whatever. But you first have to know who you are and what you stand for before you can come up with what you desire really deep down. I think that's beautiful. And I think probably that is something that people will occasionally try to skip or try to shortchange. And sometimes I think you've spoken in at least one of your guides about magic that you have to do to put out fires, which is very different, because I feel like some people that are listening to this will be like, that's great, but I need to be able to make rent. And, and then like, I need to be able to do a project management thing that is right now, because otherwise I will, not be able to make my car payment. So there's kind of different ways of doing this, right? Could you kind of address that a little?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of vibe thing, where we're all talking about self-actualization. And then there's all these layers beneath it that we want to make sure we have in place too, right? So I think that's totally fair. It is rough economic waters out there. Like, it's just crazy times. If we thought 2016, so I look back at 2016 and think, I thought things were really nuts back then. I had no idea, right? Like, things are really wobbly out there. People have lost businesses and jobs, and they've been shut up in their homes, and they're struggling. And now, you know, everything's feeling a little economically uncertain, and oh my gosh, right? So, like, how do you worry about like your core inner wellspring of love and happiness when, yeah, you got rent, you got kids to feed? The nice thing about that is that both magic and project planning absolutely work on that level too. And I think that's really nice because, oh, look at the old grimoires. Their spells are full of like, heal my boil. I have a boil on my ass I want to get rid of. Keep people safe. Curse my enemies, frankly, and like get me laid. People back then weren't any more kind of mystical than we were. They had very human concerns. They had concerns about being prosperous with their families and being safe and healthy and not getting crapped on by bad guys, basically, right? You know, and think of all the spells around safe journeying, right? You know, back in the day when there were, you know, brigands and highwaymen who would steal your stuff. So I think it works at that level too. And in fact, I have a whole book. I just put out a whole book on this. It was kind of a short little guide that I was sort of passing around based on some old stuff, and I expanded it significantly. It's called Risky Business, and it's on my site. It's like $10, and it's like 90,000 like. I think it's 90 pages, 70,000 words, something like that. There's a whole chunk of information on crisis management, risk mitigation, and managing those issues, and like untangling the real entwined problems that people have. It includes a ton of divination, right? A bunch of different tarot readings to help you sort out like what you should be worrying about, where the risks are, how you might solve them, what the problem really is. And then some interesting ideas for magic around getting yourself out of that situation. Because you're right. If you're really worried about, you know, getting the bills paid, you're not worried about, you know, your permaculture farm in 5 years, right? You're focused more near term. And the whole front end of it is about that putting out fires stuff. You know, about triage and working on the stuff that's going really wrong in the immediate moment.
Yeah.
It's a cheery book. Actually, it's not a hugely negative book, right? It's a real
I've read it. But it's true, because sometimes I think it's important to put that out there right away, which is that you don't. I think this is another one of the things that I wanted to touch on with you. We are both very much of the school of do more magic. The answer is, you know, and one of the things I absolutely love about your work is that the answer is not mundane or magical. It is both of those things intertwined, and how those intertwine can be very different for different people, different practitioners of different schools of magic that can look different, but it's still intertwined. However, it is good to remind people that you don't need to wait until you have a perfect life already in order to become a mystic and to become this phenomenal witch that you imagine in your head you have to be. That it is still very appropriate for the times when it feels like, oh, I'm putting out fires. Well, that's very much what the grimoires are about and what magic is about. I think that's a really beautiful thing. So in relation to that, you mentioned already some of the tarot spreads and some of the advice that you have for people within Risky Business. Let's go back, I think, first to goal setting. How do you think about the relationship between divination and some of those initial stages of figuring out what your let's not say values per se, because that I think you wouldn't do necessarily by divination, but when you're trying to get from those values to something, how do you incorporate divination, or what stage do you start to incorporate that?
So a process like this, where you're saying, I have values, I'm working on a vision for my life, and then I'm going to make some goals, right? That kind of process. The thing that's important to note is that it's not first you do discreetly this, and then when you're done with this, do you do the next thing? No, you're working on all of them at once. In fact, you should be doing like the granular stuff, getting stuff done, right? Chop wood, carry water while you're doing these other pieces. And then you integrate them and they circle around each other. And it's more of an iterative, agile process, right? This is one of the things I talk about a lot, is making things agile, flexible, so that you can keep trying things out. In terms of how divination supports you, it's really at the level of, if we think about what divination kind of does, and I'm a card person, so that's kind of my thing, but it can be any divination. Sometimes it's messages from the gods, like just divination, right? It's like in the name. Sometimes it's about understanding things now. Like sometimes we don't need to know the future. We need to know what the hell is going on, right? So sometimes it's that. It can be purely psychological. I don't know how I even feel about this. And the process can help you pull that out of you. And then, of course, there's an element of fortune telling, right? Which is like what's going to happen. So one of the things that I like to do in terms of using divination, these steps, is so there is an element of sort of you can explore your values through divinatory techniques. You might not do a tarot spread, but you could definitely do dream interpretation or incubation. You could do journeying, which can be divinatory, right? There's sort of aspects of it there. And then when you're looking at, what kind of life do I think I want? Well, one of the things you can do is do divination, not to tell you what your future will be, but to tell you what to do now to get to your future. And that's one of the ways I like to flip it on its head. So if you lay back, play some soothing meditative music, and try to envision yourself 3, 5 years, whatever feels right, out, maybe a year, maybe 5. This all depends on your life and how old you are and all of that. But, a few years in the future, don't think, well, this is the exact job and I have 2 kids and they look exactly like this. No, that's not. But just, how do you feel? What do you experience? Look around you. What do you see? Is it a cottage? Are you in the country? Do you have your hands in the earth? Or maybe it's a potter's studio, or you're traveling and having an adventure. Just those senses and feelings, right? And then lay some cards, not what's going to happen to me, but what do I need to know and what do I need to do right now to get me closer to that vision? And it's not even fortune. It's more like fortune creating, right? Like I'm like, I want to make this future. Don't tell me what future I'm going to get right now, because maybe I don't want that one. I want this future. What do I need to know now to get there? And that's a powerful way to use the cards. And it doesn't just have to be cards, right? This obviously could work with any sort of sortilege kind of, runes, eking, all of that. But it's a way of sort of saying, I'm trying to take a little control of this process. Yes, there's futures out there that I can reach and futures that I probably can't. Not being a princess at this point in my life, not being an astronaut, right? But what can I accomplish? How can I get closer to this picture I have that I would like to have? Which might not even be a clear picture. It might be very foggy. It might just be images and sensations. You might just have a sense of safety, a safe, peaceful place where you can be you. And then you can ask, what do I need to know or do to get that feeling in my life, to get to that place, wherever that place is? You might not know.
Yeah, I really like that, because one of the things I've noticed when I've talked to some friends of mine and a couple of common mates of mine is that sometimes there's also a sort of stasis that can creep in because we're waiting to have the perfect vision, because you're waiting for the full idea to be there, presented to you, as if it was like a dream will come to you and you will see all of it and you'll know exactly where you are in this perfect vision. But that's not actually how. Sometimes you do get those flashes of inspiration or, some sort of incredible divination experience, but sometimes it's also just moving like inch by inch closer to something that is in the direction of what you know is right for you, but you don't have to wait until you get the full picture, and that divination can support that in the same way, which also gets around the idea of like allowing divination to dictate your fate, because in this case you are asking a question that is directed towards the fate you want to create anyway. So it's not just taking any future, but saying, pointed in this type of future, what do I need to know?
Exactly.
Yeah. So with that being said, are there times when, I mean, I suppose this is kind of a personal question. Are there times when you have done that type of reading and found that the answer gives you something that is very difficult and that it causes you to change your goals? Or do you feel that it always supports kind of movement in the direction you expected?
So I think that if I've learned anything over kind of the decades I've done magic, it's that we get glimpses and hints of what will happen and what we'd like to happen. But truthfully, we are in a high chaos environment right now. And the best thing to do is to course correct in the general direction, but be flexible. Like I never thought, when probably 20 years ago now, I had this job and I hated it. And I was just burnt out. It sucked. And I found this book that the title of the book was, I don't know what I want, but I know it's not this. I talk about this all the time. I was like, I saw that book and I was like, that's me. That's me. I don't know what I want, but this isn't it. And my life wasn't terrible. I had a day job, right? I had a desk job, had a nice family, right? Like had a place to live. Really, I was just miserable. And at that point, if I'd gone back to myself and said, this is where you will end up, I would never have believed it. Because it's not a jump to an end state. It's a process that you go through. And the only thing we have really is our choices as we go, right? So I could have made different choices and ended up in a different place. But if I keep my vision and my goals in front of mind, right? Like if I don't forget about them, then I will be making in the day-to-day, doing things and making choices that get me toward that. But two, it won't be the wrong thing when I get there, which is that whole, now I have a degree that I don't really want. So, yeah, and in fact, there are sort of three kinds of goals. So like if you're sitting around thinking, ooh, it's the new year, I want a goal for next year. I mean, let's be honest. You're right that this is a great time to have this chat. This is the bread and butter for my kind of circle thrice work, right? I help people make goals, do magic, help figure stuff out. If you're not like on your game in December, right? Like this is the time. Everybody wants to kick it off. But if you're in that boat, there's three kinds of goals at a high level. There's goals where you know where you want to go and you know how to get there. If you know that you want to go to nursing school, for example, that's very knowable, right? You go to the college, you find out about their program, you find out what to do to apply, and it's just staying on top of your tasks and keeping stuff in order and not procrastinating. That's the easiest kind of goal. The next kind of goal is that you know where you want to go, but you don't know how to get there. That's the whole, I would like 5 acres in the country, but you can see zero connection between where you are now in like a New York apartment, right? Working 2 jobs and 5 acres in the country. But you know that's what you want. That's the second kind of goal. And for that kind of goal, you need to focus on going, it's like you can see the peak of the mountain, but it's all fog. You just got to pathfind. Keep trying, keep looking ahead a little at a time, keep the goal always in mind, right? Be open to fate and the wiles of the world. The third kind of goal, see, that sounds harder, but that's not even the hardest. The third kind of goal is you don't know what you want and you don't know how to get there. And you just know that you don't want what you have now, right? Like anything but this 5, right? So, and I'm kind of kicking off something for, it's for my membership, but it's not just for my membership. Like anybody could join in, but my members are going to get it as part of the membership, a kind of a goals course that I've been kicking off, and it's going to get into this, like, what are the types of goals? How do you approach each one? How do you make a goal? So I think probably everyone kind of knows about SMART goals, right? They're specific, they're measurable, they're achievable, right? That I get into that in case people don't know, but then I also get into this idea that I call magic goals. Like, goals shouldn't just be SMART, they should be magicable. That's a word. I invented it. But so a goal that's both smart and magical is easier for you to enchant to achieve.
Yeah. Which allows us to kind of put some of our other skills into motion with that. And I think that even with, as you were saying, there are the three types of goals, which I really love that, because it, as I said before, it allows people to have direction and not feel bad about their progress, even if it's not, oh, I want to be a nurse and the school I want to go to is X. Cool for you, but some people it's a little bit more vague, or much more vague than that, but there's still ways to enchant for that and to plan for that at the same time. But I think at the heart of this also then is the other reason why doing frequent magic for me, and I want to ask your opinion on this, at frequent divination and frequent magic around goals and around kind of what our values are in life, is because it gives a check-in system, in a sense, which allows us to have more frequent ways to see whether we really like the progress we're making, or whether the thing that we thought we were going towards actually isn't what we wanted, and we will course correct a little sooner, rather than realizing a year later that we did some massive magical working on the 1st of January, and then only realize in November of that year that, like, oh, wait, I should have checked in, and I don't really like how this is going. So would you agree that kind of like more frequent, like the frequency helps make sure we don't go too far off course?
It does. And this is what I was talking about and having an agile model for this. So my professional experience is in like software. And there's a common way of making software. It's very popular now. It's called Agile. And like back in, I think, the 70s, the software engineers holed up in a ski chalet and had like a meeting and decided that the way they were making software wasn't working. Because what would happen is the customer or the business person would come and say, build me X. And then they would get all these complicated requirements, and then they would finally start building it. And 6 months later, they would say, I have brought to you your feature. And then the person would be like, yeah, we didn't want that. That's not what we wanted. We thought we did, but we don't. Or we wanted it, but now everything's different because things move fast. And they were like, this is dumb. And this is stressful, and it doesn't make good software. And so they came up with this agile kind of format. And I have a free book. Like we talked about this probably last time I was on the show. Sign up for the newsletter. There's a little free book on doing agile form of magic. But the whole point is that you iterate rapidly, you fail fast, you try stuff out, and you always check back in to see if it's going the way you expected. So, and it's the same both with the mundane things. So like you give yourself a big list of tasks toward a goal, and at the end of the month you go, how did that go? Did I get those done? Were there problems? Am I unhappy with my progress? Am I thinking maybe this was a whole mistake? But you're not waiting a year, you're waiting like 2 weeks or 4 weeks. And the same with the magic and divination. You're saying, I'm going to take a moment to look ahead now. What do I want to try to do this coming month or fortnight, if that's your thing? And then, what do I want to do? What do I want to enchant for? And you just keep cycling it. And it's great because you don't get an opportunity to get way off course. Because you were talking about that earlier. You asked me, did you ever be in a situation where you started doing the divination, your goal entirely changed? Not really, because usually when I was in that situation, I had no idea what the goal was. I was in that third project category. So in that case, like I said, you're just pathfinding in the fog. You take little steps, you check in with yourself, you keep doing the work and the magic and the divination. And of course, I'm in a complete agreement. This is like that quote, if the mushrooms didn't work, take more mushrooms. I'm trying to remember who said that. of Casey.
I do know the quote, but sadly, I don't know who.
Somebody will tell us that.
Yes, someone will definitely write it and say.
But it's the same with magic. Like if the magic isn't working, do more. Like try more stuff, figure stuff out. And if it's a pressing need, if it is emergency magic or a crisis, something's on fire, then still do more magic. Just do what you know. The moment that you really are under the gun is not the time to be like, maybe I should take a year-long astrology course to figure out how to solve this. No, you do what you know. And I figure if you have in your toolkit a form of divination, a form of odds manipulation, candle magic, sigils, whatever, some sort of visionary technique, meditative journeying of some kind, right? And a spirit posse, some folks in your corner, your ancestors. You're good. Like that's your baseline toolkit. Yeah. And it's okay and totally legit to fall back on the things you know. So like we are totally spoiled for choice. I was just following a conversation on this where, in the olden days, we might have had one book that we could barely read, 400 years ago or something for magic. Now we have bookshelves of the books and we have spoiled for choice and we can learn new systems and take more classes. And it's so exciting. You don't have to do that. You can lean into what you already do well and get better at it, but also do way more magic with it.
Yes, I completely agree. I want to, this kind of brings up the idea of genuinely, I'm curious to hear your opinions of this, because sometimes other friends of mine that are magically inclined or witches of some form or another will say, yes, I completely agree. I just never get around to doing divination, or I know I need to do more magic or more rituals or whatever the case may be, but people don't. And people will, sometimes it's, oh, I'm very busy, because as you said, these are chaotic times. So people can just genuinely, their lives are just that on fire, and we all have to do what we can. And not everyone can do all the things they want to do every day. I wish we could. I'm an Aries. I would pack my schedule so full that I would not sleep, but it's not possible. But I think that sometimes we all, and I know I've had this too, we have resistance to doing some of these magical things. And do you have an opinion on why sometimes people resist doing these things that they know would help, or advice that you've given to people about that?
I think that, so this is such a good question, because this resistance, sometimes the resistance is called procrastination. Procrastination is the virtue signaling snooty way of being like, well, you're just procrastinating and you should be doing the thing. Or, and I hate this one, well, if it was a priority for you, you'd be getting it done, wouldn't you? Yeah, that's not how that works. Resistance comes from a lot of times from places inside you that are like shadowy and you kind of have to dig at. So you might really not be doing the magic because the one time you tried it, it worked super well and it freaked you the fuck out, right? That could be it. It could just be terrifying. Or it could be that you're really just afraid of failing. You do the big enchantment and then nothing happens and it doesn't feel good. You don't feel the spark. And then is the world just nothing and all magic is fake? And I think everyone goes through that. Everyone has those moments where they're like, am I just crazy? Or you might actually fear success, right? That's the flip side of that other coin. You're fearing failure. You might fear success. Like, what if I do it and it works? Am I worthy of what I get? Can I handle it? Right? What if I get everything I want and then it's not what I want? So there's all these places that this resistance comes from, and they're worth working on. But again, being sort of the pragmatic project manager, and not the shamanic deep therapy kind of person, my attitude is that you find a workaround to dodge that problem, not so that you're not working on it, but so you can be getting shit done while you're working on it, right? If your reticence to do magic comes from some sense of worthiness, which might come from some things that happened when you were very young, then, dude, that's going to take a while. That's going to take some work to sort of unpack and heal from and process through. And you can't be waiting to start your life until that's done. Just like you can't be waiting to start anything before you have the perfect vision of your life. You got to get going. So my thinking is there's lots of reasons you might have that reticence, but the key is just to work around it. And the trick to working around it is to make it as easy as possible. So I'll hear people say, I'm going to launch some sigils. I'm going to do some candle magic. I need to clear my schedule for a couple hours. And I'm like, takes you 2 hours to launch some sigils? I launched 100 sigils in 5.5 months. I was talking about this. I had a major goal. I launched a batch every week. So every week I came up, I had a running list of statements. I turned them into sigils. I'd launch a batch of them. You know, the shoal, right? I'd launch a shoal of them. I did that every week for 5.5 months. I had a box of cards. At the end, the box was empty. My goal worked really well. It worked great. I succeeded. But if I had to spend a couple hours doing that, I never would have even started. I got my process down to like 15 minutes. And if you have, it can be great to do the all-night ritual. With sitting up, just lighting the candles, meditating sometimes you just don't have time. So you've got to like strip it down to the basics. I have this concept of having just like a framework, a modular framework of reusable pieces of magic. My standard opener, I have it memorized. I don't have to look it up. My standard close, I have it memorized. A couple of options for just putting myself in a position or calling on whoever. And I'm good at those. I do those all the time. It's fun to be creative sometimes and do something new and invent ritual. But if I don't have time, I still got to get stuff done. And that's how you do it. And that makes it easier to get around kind of the blocks and the reticence.
Yeah, and I think there's also, for myself, I'm curious because you already mentioned like that fear of failure, but I think part of it for me when I had some resistance to it, and I've been practicing since I was 12, but we all kind of like phase in and out of some of these things. I think it's not like, oh, I have handled that problem. Good, I will never have it again. But it's like, we have things that come up for us that at different times then go away. But one of the things that I did was realize that it's kind of, as a professional violinist, I don't land every shift every single time when I'm performing. There's no expectation of perfection. But if you don't practice, if you don't try it, then you're not going to improve your accuracy. And it's the same thing with magic, where like there are certain things where divination should give you a baseline. You should have accuracy with it, and you should be able to measure that accuracy. But it's not that you have to expect perfection or that every sigil shoal will land or every spell will land or any of this. But you have to sort of allow for things to evolve and sometimes for things not to work and for that still to be okay. And I think with our vision of magic, sometimes we think that it's either perfect and it works every time, or it doesn't and you're a failure. You're probably just not good at it or something.
Or it doesn't exist, right? The ultimate, like, I was wrong. It's all just materialism. The world is disenchanted today. And we do all kind of cycle back through these challenges and these approaches. And that's because we're in the world we're in, right? It takes practice and effort to enchant your world and see the enchantment that's already in the world, right? It can be hard because our entire society and world is designed to keep you from that. I don't want to say it's like a tinfoil hat conspiracy, but that's just how it is. It doesn't lend toward an enchanted view of the world. So it takes effort and practice to kind of keep that going. The longer I've been doing it, the better I get. But holy cow, when you said no expectation of perfection, well, yeah, thank goodness, because we all still kind of fall down on it. Yeah.
Speaking of achieving that perfection, one of the things that is very prominent in the works that you put out is timing, obviously, because you put out these calendars and these ways of sort of planning your month if you're project managing. And project planning, then you're obviously going to look at when you do things. And you do, as you mentioned, a combination of sort of grimoire timing and decan timing and things of that nature. Could you kind of talk to us about how you think about timing? Like for my little Greek heart, there's like the idea of kairos, which is like finding the right time, the perfect time for something. And there's that tension point between finding the perfect time for something and also not saying, well, I'll just have to keep waiting until the perfect time arrives.
Yeah, yes. That's absolutely right. I mean, there's sort of a continuum from we shall not do the thing until April the 14th at 3:46 p.m. because that is when we have elected astrologically, according to the stars, that we must do the thing. All the way to, we just do shit whenever. Now, there's a big gray area in there. And I think the important way to approach, kind of mentally approach this, is that when you have good timing, it's the right time, the magic tends to work better. There's a reason that like every single system of magic has this sort of concept of time and place, right? It either has directionality or stars and if you think about the positions of astronomical bodies in the universe, the actual positions of us and the sun and the planets, that's not just space, it's time. It's literal space-time. There's a reason that every single system has a concern around that. Whether it's from the most basic, we do X on the new moon and X on the full moon, right? Or the very complex, the royal astrologer has decreed that the day for the fasting of the thing of X is on April 14th, right? So there's a reason to lean into it a little bit, but you can't let it has to be in service to actually getting anything done. And so there's probably a good balance point for people, right? And it might vary on who you are. Some people are much more intuitive and just sort of like, this feels right and I'm doing it. And then, hey, I put out an entire monthly guide that says, this particular Wednesday is good for healing, and I would recommend a healing spell, which is kind of what my planner does. So it has all this astrology and interesting bits, but at the core, I'm saying this day is to mitigate against harmful thoughts and bad speech. So don't make bad speech, but also keep yourself protected. Or another day that might be, Jupiterian. Have a party, invite all your friends, feed everyone, right? And do a spell for court cases, or do a spell for love, have a date night. So it's that kind of timing. But the truth is that you can get as specific or not as makes sense for you. The reason I put out this planner to begin with is because I was making it for myself. I was learning kind of from Rune Soup, I was learning what days are good for what things. And I'm like, I love this. I want to lean into this. I want to learn more about why this is. And I started really doing kind of like a deep dive on that kind of sort of mundane astrology. Like I don't care about birth charts and I am not an astrologer. I don't play one on TV. I'm not going to, read your chart end to end. But I was really more interested in kind of how the aspects in the sky might lead to better or worse magic. And I was doing it for myself. I was doing it on paper for a really long time and like a bullet journal style. Like I'd make a month every month. And then I would like, my hand is cramping up. I'm going to do it digitally. And then I'm like, maybe someone else would like this. And that's how it started. But I don't always do everything based on it, right? You would think I would. I bother to make the thing. But there are times when I just feel like this is the moment that I should be doing X, and I do it. The odd thing is that after 2 years of putting out this planner, I find that I get the right time anyway for some sort of weird leaning in intuitive kind of reason where I'm just like, today feels like a day where we should just stay home, hunker down, have like tea, not do much. And then I look at the planner and I'm like, oh, that was a good idea. Glad I thought of that. So.
Yes, so that you find that as you're doing more of it, the universe sort of, your awareness of those flows kind of take over in a sense, a little bit more intuitively. Yeah.
Yeah. And it might just depend on kind of what you're after. If you just really want to make some offerings to the ancestor in the morning and do a little blessing when you're cooking dinner, you don't need timing for that. I mean, you do that. That's awesome. That's amazing. Then other times you have like a major prosperity goal that you want to spend 6 months on, plug it into the various each month and then find the best days and get all the leverage you can.
Absolutely. And I think that ties into one of the things that I wanted to ask if you could maybe share a little bit of how you think about, you already mentioned your own giant goal that you had where you did an enormous number of sigils and you had lists of goals and you launched those sigils. I am also, a rune soup person. So yes, I'm all about sigils and launching sigils. And are there ways that you encourage people to think about like dividing up large scale goals into smaller ones? I'm sure you have entire courses and books on this, but is there in brief something that you can share with people? Because I know that sometimes when I've talked to people about this, it can be overwhelming to say, well, I have this giant goal. Now I don't know how to break it down into smaller magic other than doing like one giant working, which I think giant working can be nice, can be very helpful. You put a lot of time and thought into it, but then how do you break down sort of a flow charting of the littler things?
So this is funny because I was just kind of writing on this the other day, like the other week, and I was this is why we're really bad at estimating how long things are going to take. So do you ever like it's awful. And I'm probably better than a lot of people because I have like a lot of practice, like having to do it I do it for others. I have folks like I work with and they're like, let's take a week. And I'm like, it's a month. And other people are like, this takes 6 months. I'm like, I'll have it done in 2. Because I used to it, but it's hard. This is part of the reason it's hard. There's this sort of experience people have where they'll like go out to their messy shed, right? The shed is a black hole that everything's been tossed into for 3 years. And they'll look at it and be like, you know what I'm going to do this afternoon? I'm going to clean the shed. 2 hours tops, be fine. Of course it's not. Like this is a 2-month project with sub projects. But in your head, you're like, clean shed is a thing I can do. Clean shed is not actually a doable thing, right? And so at the end of the 2 hours, like it'll be worse than before. Everything will be on the lawn. It's going to start raining. Your family's hungry. Everything is a mess. You're filthy. It's worse than before. You end up throwing everything back in the shed and going, yeah, well, I'm never going to think about that again. We all do this with big projects. And it's because in our heads, it's one thing, right? It's like, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a business. Okay, that's a task. It's like start business, check. No, I mean that's that's an undoable mass of goo. You have to like pull it out. The way to pull it out is to go through a sort of a process of kind of not just breaking it down into smaller pieces. Everyone says that, and then you're like, how do I? It's really more about defining it well. So I'm going to take the worst example from everyone's, like the famous example from everyone's list of New Year's resolution, which is like, get healthy. It's like the most undoable thing ever, right? Like, what does that even mean, right? Like you can't wake up New Year's morning. And yes, it would be better not to like have hair of the dog and like pancakes. Yes, you can make healthier choices, but like get healthy isn't a thing. So what you do though is then you start to think about, what does this mean to me? Right? What does it mean to be healthy? What might I change? Might I quit smoking? Because that's its own sub-project right there, which might involve buying things, doctor's visits, a lot of stress. You might just decide really it's a dietary change, like I should eat better. Great. Now I'm done. No, because eat better is also an undoable mass of goo. So you have to break that down a level and say, what does eat better mean? More meat and less carbs? For some people, that's better. Whereas for other people, less meat is better, and probably more vegetables is better for everyone, right? So, but you just kind of got to work it down, like defining it. And then when you have a goal that's like, be healthier, that's not anything anyone could accomplish. If you have a goal that's like your goal, your project is actually like healthier me, with like a logo that's magical with a sigil, and you got like a plan that you put on your shrine and that you're burning candles to. And I recommend everyone do this. In there are goals that are things like, I want to go for a walk every day that the temperature is above X, at least 5 times a week for 30 minutes. That's actually a doable thing. Now, still, if you don't have shoes or the right hat or gloves, there's still pieces to do, but that's actually doable. You might say, I'm going to have a vegetable with every meal and salad 3 times a week for lunch. That's eating better, but that's actually something you could do. So that's how you do it. You'd like break down the big project into the goals, and those goals have that SMART component. They're specific and measurable. They're also magical, which means that they're intuitive and they're guided by kind of your values and all of that. So, and again, I'm kicking off a course on this, but the key is that you keep defining it. And then with luck, you get down to an actual task list, which could be something like, buy a blender, go to the grocery store on Sunday for smoothie ingredients, make healthy smoothies for lunch, right? Get recipes, and then make a smoothie, and then make another. And then next thing you know, you have a healthier diet and you're healthier, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to me because I feel like we all know it's one of those things where we all kind of know how to do this in some areas of our lives, and then others it's more difficult because we haven't broken it down, or we have resistance, or there's, like you were saying, this is where you get into shamanism and therapy and all sorts of other things where problems can crop up in differing ways in different areas of our lives. I'm a violin teacher with my students. I'm always like, and then we break the goal down. And then what do we have to do? We have to make sure that we work on the double stops that are exactly for the thing you have in the piece. It's all the same thing. It's alchemy, which is the breaking down and then the putting back together again. And ultimately, when we learn how to do that, then we can apply it in all these different facets of our lives. But being able to do that in every facet of our life is, we will have to be enlightened beings to be able to do that equally well, or to be someone like you and be able to help others through it in all different aspects. But ultimately, there are so many similarities in any different area you break this down. It's the same, breaking it down, putting it back together in a way that isn't just destruction and stuff on the lawn, like you said, but that is manageable and reasonable and then can be put back together in a better way. But that takes time and care to figure out.
Well, and not only that, but like that's where it's easier to connect the magic to it, because that was your original question, right? It's not just about, project people. There's lots of people who will tell you how to break down a goal and make a SMART goal and all that. But like, how do you align your magic to it? That's the key, is when you have defined something to the level that you have doable pieces, then magic becomes part. Yes, you could do the big working. And in fact, you should do a big project initiation. That healthier you project should have its own ritual with its own like sponsored deities and its own call, and burn incense to it and do all the good magic for it. The big working is still great, but then down at the level of, I want a smoothie for lunch, like way down at the bottom when you're mixing the smoothie, then why don't you write yourself a little smoothie blessing that you can say over your smoothie? Let the vitamins in this smoothie come into my system, and let it be with my biome and all of the parts of myself, and let it be healing to me, and let it, whatever it is, right? So now you have a piece of magic that you can really like leverage along with, and all of it rolls up to this kind of big working and this big goal, this big project. So this is where you do the I make a prayer to this saint for strength in the face of temptation because I'm trying to stop drinking soda or stop smoking cigarettes. I am launching sigils to help find me exercise equipment that's affordable, or people who share my exercise goals that I can go, exercise with, or a place to walk. Help me find a place to walk that's safe and peaceful, right? And those all become the magical targets that get hung all over this thing. Like they're like ornaments on a tree. Sorry, it's a time of year specific metaphor, but you're saying I have this thing that I'm trying to grow, this goal I'm trying to reach, and I'm going to hang all these pieces on it.
Mm-hmm. And that they're all important. I think that's the other thing that you are stressing, is that it is the as you said, like the launching and the big project, the big magic, the big ritual is important, but so are all of the littler pieces. And that just because it's little doesn't mean that it doesn't have an enormous amount of power behind it, as long as it is done. If it's a practice that has meaning for you and you are doing it properly, I mean, I have to kind of put that in there where, you should kind of learn what it is you're going to do before you do it. But still, it can be incredibly simple and yet still have power and empowerment behind it.
Yeah, and sometimes the very simple stuff is super powerful. I mean, we can't really understate the power of having just a handful of prayers to beings that you have kind of in your relationship with, are in relationship with, or in your posse, or something to help you. That's incredibly powerful, especially if you're repeating it, right? Like your smoothie blessing. It sounds facetious, but it's not necessarily. And you are building this kind of backlog of energy towards your goal, but you're also and this is the other thing, you're also continuously reminding yourself of it. I mean, how often have we decided that we're going to do big thing, and we know we need to break it down? And so we do this big breakdown and we get all these pieces, and then we kind of forget about it. And then like 4 months later, we're like, oh, I was going to do that. I totally do this too. I'm sure it's human nature. Because I'm like, I am not above being like, what I need to do. And then like, later I'm like, oh, I was going to clean that shed out. Kind of never got to it, did I? When it's really important to you, which maybe cleaning the shed is not, but maybe being healthier is, doing the little pieces keeps it in front of mind, right? It builds solid habits. It allows you to really hone kind of what your magic can do, because, you can pray for a miraculous healing. You honestly can. And then that does happen for people. But if you pray to just wake up tomorrow much healthier, the response you're going to get is probably like, it's broccoli time, right? Let's go for a walk, because that's how you get healthier. It's not a one and done. And so this also gives that big power somewhere to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like bottom up and top down.
I think that's also where, I mean, for myself as a high priestess, I'm in a coven, obviously. You have a membership. There are a lot of groups out there that are very healthy and can encourage more focus on, actualizing something that we are here to do, however you want to think about that. And I think that is another one of those feedback pieces where divination, the reason why I think divination is so important, is that it is a reaching out to another and a getting feedback back. So we are in relationality with other spirits. And then that relationality is also like in a membership like you have, or in a coven or another group where you're going to have supportive feedback. It helps keep things in front of mind. It helps us move in positive directions together. It makes it easier than trying to do something alone.
That's hugely true. And if you think about divination as connecting the dots, which literally, the divination can point you to places where you want to connect or draw to or draw away from, right? Divination loves dirty laundry, right? So sometimes it's like, ooh, this is going to suck. And you're like, okay, forewarned, forearmed, right? But yeah, building connections with your inner self, the healthy parts of the outer world, the spirits and beings, all of that does help. And that's why, this is where it's so funny because you have this very, very mundane advice. Get yourself a workout buddy is like the most, that doesn't feel magical. It works, right? If you have somebody you're going to workout class with, you're more likely to go because you don't let them down and all that. But truthfully, it is magical because you're connecting with someone in the world and you're sharing a goal and making the goal stronger, and that has a magical aspect. So even stuff that sounds really sort of, life coachy, boring, kind of not that interesting is actually enchantable.
It's all magic. I know it sounds so like, oh, in the end, it's all magic. No, it is. So there is that element to it. I wanted to ask you, what do you see as you've worked with so many people? You've had this website for 10 years and you have worked with people.
Has it really been 10 years?
Okay, well, close. I feel like it's close.
Okay. I'm like, really?
Maybe I'm saying this in the interview and I will have to edit it afterwards and say, or 8 years or 15 years. And I'll try to edit it so that it doesn't sound off when I edit that piece.
It's totally fine. Disclaimer to my readers, the actual length of my website may be slightly more or less than the.
Okay. Yes, we'll put an asterisk there in the statement.
However, it feels like I've been doing it for a while. So fair enough.
Well, so my question based on that is what would you say is one of the most common I don't want to say roadblocks that people come up against, but one of the things that you see kind of takes people down and you have to coach them through. What is one thing that you'd want to sort of warn people about in advance when they're thinking about approaching all this?
This is that whole one great tip for
one great tip. Oh, I know. I'm sorry to do that to you.
Here's the click. No, here's my clickbait. No, truthfully, probably the fact that plan is a verb way more than it's a noun. They'll make a plan and then I'll talk to them again in a month and they'll be like, my plan blew up. And I'm like, yeah. And they'll be like, no, my plan blew up. Everything is broken. It's all terrible. I'm like, no. Plan is a verb. It is something you continue to do. This can feel really weird at first because you go through this effort of saying, I made this project charter and I put magic into it and I launched it as a magical project. And 3 weeks later, things are kind of interesting, not bad interesting, good interesting, but very different than I planned. That's actually how it works. And that's not to be demoralizing. That's actually a good thing because having a plan in the first place, even though you keep having to plan, like I said, it's like verbing it out. You kind of keep doing it because things do change and there's a certain amount of chaos in the world. And in fact, there's kind of a lot more chaos maybe in the world than there's ever been. That doesn't mean that we can't still try to reach our goals or make great progress toward them. It just means we have to be flexible and keep planning. And I do think that throws people off. I know it's even, like I said, it's thrown me off. You make kind of this great plan and you think, ooh, this is going to be awesome. And then you look back and you're like, ooh, I spent that year having cancer. Let me tell you, that's a plan killer. That was a plan killer for me. Totally killed all my plans. But I started the membership. I made the cancer grimoire. All this great stuff kind of came and I healed. And all this good stuff came out of it. So you just got to keep kind of rolling with the process of planning.
Yeah. It's clearly that is there are always things that are sent to us, that happen to us, and then we have to continue on the trajectory. I don't know if it was you who said this or someone else, but I've thought of it in the context of permaculture a lot about the idea of people think of goals as like a road, and it's not really a road. It's that we're all in sailboats. And if you've ever gone sailing, not that I, am the type of person that goes sailing, but I have been sailing once or twice. And it is that idea of you have to tack with the wind. So you will be heading more east and then you realize you've gone too far east and then you have to course correct and go a little more west. And it constantly is a fluctuation where you're constantly checking your direction against the wind and against, your compass and continuing to course correct. But that's nothing wrong with that. That's actually just the way that it works when you travel in that way. It's not a flat road that you just get on. I'm on the highway and that's it. But yeah.
I didn't say that, although I love the metaphor, so I'm just going to pretend I did. No, I'm kidding. Whoever said that, all credit. No, it's true, and it's true of every kind of project. This is the irony. Even I want to go to nursing school, and I know exactly what college I want to apply for. Even that cannot be a straight road. It can be like the most well-known path. Like you can understand exactly what you need to do, and then halfway there discover that you're called to go take your knowledge to help people in another country, or something goes awry in your personal life that requires you to take time to sort that out, or shit just happens, right? So any journey is going to do that. I was going to say can be, but probably will be. And this is a truism of project management as a career field, in that we know projects get upheaved and changed and waylaid, and because you learn along the way. And that's part of how it works. That's part of the process.
It's a feature, not a bug in that sense.
Well, it might be a bug of the universe.
Well, it could be at the time.
Maybe we'd like it if it wasn't that way, but that's how it works. So yeah, I guess it's a feature. It's not a great feature sometimes, but it's certainly a feature.
It's not an advertised feature, but it's still a feature.
The hidden feature that pops up. Yeah. No, blue screen crash, and then you just start over and do something different. But hey, what else are you going to do with your time here, right? Like, why are we here except to feel what's in our heart, make love in the world, try to accomplish some stuff, and then eventually we move on and do something else. So we might as well have some fun and do some magic while we're on the journey.
Yes. And I think that one of the things that Gordon White always, or he said in one of his books, I've reminded my coven of this a number of times, which is that magic should make life taste better, which I always really like as a reminder, where we are talking in this conversation a lot about, your values and, guiding our life paths and sailing these waters very carefully. And also it's about having fun too. So sometimes it's just what you want, and having fun is also valuable and worth pursuing too. It doesn't always have to be the most grandiose of things.
No, and in fact, I have to say, one of my example projects that I often use kind of with my clients and in my courses and stuff is be happier. I actually think that this might be a great, especially in the current environment we're in, this might be a great project. You want a New Year's resolution and a big project to work on this coming year, and you're kind of stuck for one. Maybe things are going okay and nothing's on fire. Be happier. It's going to be an amazing project. Totally worthwhile. Not a guilty pleasure. Should actually be on all of our to-do lists. And you can actually make a very cohesive project and do a ton of great magic for that as a goal, and it's completely worthwhile. The more happy people we have, the better off we're all going to be.
Yeah, joy is incredibly important and powerful, and way more powerful than people probably think. So
it's also very subversive. I say this a lot. Joy is subversive. It's like a big FU to a lot of powers that be that would like us to not be joyful, right? Absolutely. And again, metaphor for the time of year, if you recall your Grinch who stole Christmas, right? You don't need things necessarily to feel that joy. And that's what makes the big them nervous. It's what makes Madison Avenue nervous and the government nervous, that we could just be joyful with our connections and our magic and in ourselves. Yeah. That's really subversive right now, which is a strange thing to say, but I believe it. Like, be joyful because they don't like it.
Yeah. No, I think that is a beautiful way to end this, even though we could continue talking for another 2 or 3 hours about this very amazing topic. But I can't think of a better way to end than for people to think about moving towards happiness and moving towards joy, because I think that is just exactly what we need in this world. So we can all enchant for that. I think we'll all be better off for one another. So Ivy, I really appreciate this. I want to leave a couple of minutes for you to just, you've already mentioned, you've teased the things that are coming. And I know that by the time this is out a couple of days from now, some of it more will be live, but what do you want to tell people about what's coming for you and your site?
So I decided to do this really crazy thing end of the year and launch a bunch of stuff all at the same time. And I did it and I made it, but I made it through, but it was a lot. So I might as well talk about it a little bit. I mean, I redesigned the site. I launched 2 books. I've launched a couple of courses, one of which, that goal setting course, I'm kicking off and then is going to run through kind of early January. And the big one for my membership, and I just want to shout out to anyone who's a member who might be listening. I'm so grateful for all of you guys. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting me. I have kind of this sort of exciting new whole year in magic plan. So members will get something every single month. We're going to walk through live and have like a session on goal setting, and then one on finding values, and one on exploring how to break goals down and how to get things done. And I've got the whole year planned, case studies, like worksheets, and the live Q&A every month. And I think it's going to be really a lot of fun, actually. And it's an opportunity of, like you were saying, if there's this time of year, right? If there's something someone wants to accomplish, that's, the idea would be you'd spend the year working on it together, kind of as a group. So I'm super excited about that. And it's been a lot of fun putting all this stuff out. So yes, the marketing side of me insists that you go to circlethrice.com, blah, 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 blah. But in the meantime, but in the meantime, it's been a huge joy talking with you. And yes, full disclosure, you're a friend of mine and you're awesome. And it's just really great.
And I'm a member too. So if you become a member, I'm there too. Just so you know, very fun people out there.
Yeah, and it's just like free. The first month is free. So in case you want to give it a try, put your toe in and then decide if it's for you or not. No harm, no foul.
Absolutely. I think this is a great time of year for people to feel, with all what's going on in the world, we can all move towards joy. We can all create things and do magic together. So I'm so happy that you're putting this out there, Ivy. And thank you so much for being on the show again. I'm sure that we will find another reason to talk again on the show. So until then, I will be very happy with that.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
A wonderful conversation, as I expected it to be, with Ivy. She is one of my favorite witches to talk to. Thank you to all of you who reached out in the last couple of months to kind of ask about what was going on, since I had to take a step back from the podcast for a couple of months. Unfortunately, there were some sad times in my family. There were a couple of bereavements in our family. But I am very grateful to be back, and it meant a lot to hear from people that they missed the podcast. So don't worry, we have many exciting episodes. I have some great guests lined up for the next couple of months, and I'm really excited for that. And if you have comments or things that you'd like to see on the show, maybe suggestions of guests, I'm always happy to hear feedback. If you want to reach out to me, you can always do that through the contact form of our Coffee and Divination website, www.coffeeanddivination.com. And you can also find the podcast over on Instagram at Coffee and Divination. If you enjoy what we're doing here, it always helps to have 5-star reviews. So if you want to leave a good review on whatever platform you listen to this podcast, I would really appreciate it. It does help us. And I'm always happy to hear feedback from all of you. I'm grateful for all of you and for all of the blessings of the people in my life, now and always. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the new year. May you have a blessed and happy new year. Enjoy your journeys with divination, and I'll see you next time.